When everything is marketing and marketing is everything, taglines and trends are just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. On the M Word, we're talking marketing and mission and the pursuit of what's personal. I'm your host, Jennifer Mulchandani, and you are listening to the M Word podcast presented by Arlington Strategy. All right, Andy, I'm very glad you're here for this conversation today. And I will say, I typically start off by asking my guests to sort of tell us what your journey is and how you got there. And then, as you know, I always ask guests, like, where was a point of failure or something that was really important in your business? Your story, it's anchored a little bit in failure. So why don't you go ahead and give us that context and your journey, if you will, in the big bullet form.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to appear and also for the chance to tell my story. It's gratifying to be able to connect with you and to share some stories of success, but as you mentioned, anchored in failure. When I think back over my professional background, anybody knows that nobody gets through life unscathed. And I'm blessed as I look back where I don't think I've made a whole lot of material mistakes, but something that sort of strikes me is in looking back, that the departure from what I determined to be my core career path ended up being the thing that was the gateway to a lot of success. When I started my professional career, I graduated from law school. I went to law school and I wasn't order of the coif top 10%, but I still ended up sort of in the top 25, was diligent and studious. My wife was very, very supportive as I went through. And my ambition, Jennifer, was to be a federal judge. It seemed like, especially at the time in the mid-2000s, that it was the federal judges who kind of ran the show, who were able to either, and I didn't realize it at the time, but they always seemed to find a way to discern what was true and to be able to be that force for good in the universe. And I figured, what greater career ambition for somebody going into the field of law than to be a federal judge, somebody who is able to hear both sides, apply a level head and rational thinking, and to be able to hopefully make a positive impact on the universe, at least in the field of jurisprudence. So I came out and I wanted to get into the legal background because I wanted to learn about real estate. Got my hands on every real estate course that I could. I was a loan officer before I went to law school, so I always had a penchant for entrepreneurship, for property ownership, and to people who were able to build wealth through whatever means they could, especially if they were able to do it in real estate, as we had a burgeoning population. So I did it. I graduated from law school. It was 2007, not to date myself. Was able to pass the North Carolina bar, got myself aligned with a North Carolina-based law firm that had an office in Chapel Hill, one of the fastest growing areas of the country, and I thought I had my dream job, something where I could learn, something where I could apply myself, make great connections, and ultimately, hopefully, get into that judiciary role. And I hated it. I was working for top-notch professionals, but I didn't understand the context of the law. Even though I had all the book smarts, I didn't have the street smarts and the practical side of things. William & Mary did its darndest to make sure I had that practical background, but as the rubber met the road, it wasn't a good fit for me personally, professionally. Starting a real estate practice in 2008 also probably wasn't the best of time to do that. And I got fired. It's not fun for me to say, but the reality was I wasn't bringing the law my best, and it wasn't the best fit for me. And the
Can I just ask you, like, in hindsight, and I appreciate you sharing that, because we those words are powerful and they're meaningful, and I know that you're on a path now, and we'll get there, that is feeling good to you. But the self of you today, and hindsight's this horrible lens it's unfair to judge ourselves with. When you look back, do you think your certainty of what you wanted was real? Like, were you really that certain? Like, now that you can judge in hindsight, or was it like you made you thought that was the decision and you just stuck to it, and were kind of that youthful unwillingness to open yourself up to maybe you wanted something else?
It's interesting you bring that up, because over the past 20 years, I have always held sort of mental snapshots of things that I wanted to accomplish, and figured that if I didn't accomplish that specific thing as I visualized it, that somehow that meant I was a failure. But I'm going back again through The Gap and the Gain, the Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy book. And their admonition it finally clicked with me to say, look, the things that you're idealizing, the thing that you have in your targets, in your scope, let that inspire you. Don't let that be the benchmark for whether you're a success or failure. Let that help you make progress and actually gain. Don't focus on the gap between you and what you think that target is. It took me a long time before I realized that's what I was doing, was internalizing that gap and focusing too much on it and not allowing myself to recognize the gain and the progress I had been making. Now, thankfully, in 2008, I was able to shift that focus enough to sort of say, if the law isn't working for me, what talents and skills have I gotten in this time frame? I've learned certainly perspective about the law, but I've also learned a lot about people. I was observing that during 2008 was the financial crisis. There was a lot of wealth that had been left on the table. People were really shell-shocked by the economic downturn. And there were a lot of people who were hurting during that time frame. They saw the bills that were basically helping people get bailed out from that, but people weren't feeling the bailout in their own right, in their own household. So I was wondering, is there a way I could take this legal perspective and apply it in a way that didn't bill people by the hour, but it gave them the perspective and that inspiration that they were able to make progress again. And that's what led me to a career in financial services, where as an advisor, it's my job to work one-on-one with successful families to help hold the light for them of what they can accomplish in the future and to give them the steps and strategies to get there.
Yeah, and I find it interesting that your early, youthful motivation was about putting yourself in a position of almost third party mediator, that the judge's opinion of what are facts and what's really happening here. And I have to imagine there's a parallel in what you do when you meet and you work with business owners, you work with families and individuals, that you're able to bring a perspective that isn't personally invested in their what they want, right? But it could be this arbiter of what they need, right?
Yeah. That's been the interesting thing about finance as well, is because there are a lot of different muscles that I have to flex, a lot of different hats that I'm wearing. Some people think of financial advisor being a glorified stockbroker, and candidly, for a lot of people who bear that title, financial advisor, it is. But having this additional perspective, this legal background and appreciation that it's more than just the stocks and bonds in a person's portfolio, that there are goals, there are values, there are interests, there are priorities that need to be addressed first so that you understand the context of what a person is trying to have that money do for them. It's not about dying with the most money in the bank, because that's the high score on the leaderboard maybe for the local pinball machine, but it is about what you're able to do with your resources so that you can get max return on life, not just return on investment. Mm-hmm. And so I've found a lot of fulfillment in bringing that message to my clientele and the people I interact with.
Yeah, and so we should, just for those late to the game and those who might be watching this on video, Edward Jones, this beautiful sign behind you, is not a law firm. It is a financial firm. So you're with Edward Jones, but you are essentially an entrepreneur in the sense of you affiliate with your brand, but you're building your own business, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very curious for you how those earlier hurdles of finding yourself and where you wanted to be and how you want to be serving the world, right? How those have influenced entrepreneurship for you.
It has been an interesting track for me because a lot of what I've tried to build into my persona, the main guideposts or the mile markers, if you will, haven't changed. But the journey and where the road is meandering has certainly changed over the past 15 years. For example, over my what I call relatively brief financial career, I've seen no fewer than 5 significant estate law tax changes motivated by different parties in control of Congress or the White House. That has led to a lot of different talking points that, absent a perspective in law, I don't know that I would have had. And if I didn't have that perspective, I don't know that I'd be able to add that extra value back to my clients. Candidly, some of the clients that I've worked with, their priorities have changed as well. Some of them, it was all about getting that mountain of assets as quickly as they could, trying to find the investments that would help short circuit their success. But a lot of time, wealth is built over time, not overnight. And over the course of time, people's definition of success changes. They might have children, they might have grandchildren. They realize that it's not about what you have in the bank account, it's what you're able to do with those funds, how you're able maybe to send a kid or grandkid to college, how if you have a child who fails to launch, how you can make sure that their needs are taken care of, but you don't otherwise extinguish the work ethic that they need to have in order to be productive. And that is some of the progression, I would say, in my career, that I've been able to wear the hats of not just financial advisor, but more importantly of a wealth strategist, somebody who's helping to make sure that we're keeping aware of tax law changes, estate law changes. Risk protection is hugely important now as we have a very litigious society, people who are more than eager to unjustly take away people's wealth. And finally, charities and causes that are important for them, that if a person doesn't take the time as an advisor to get to know the client, then all those important priorities just kind of get swept under the rug and they never get properly addressed.
So how do you advise a client who, and it's interesting because as you were talking, like I kept thinking, wow, it sounds like entrepreneurship. What is success? And, we think it's, going viral and something happening to our business overnight when really it's about strategy and planning and the long game and reevaluating priorities. And what I thought success in my business would be could be completely different, but still just as equally good or satisfying. So how do you define success for yourself?
Success for myself is something that gets back to what I consider my core values. And I had to go through a couple of decades of life before I really centered on what my core values were. We're all kind of raised with values from our household, from our parents. At least parents who tend to do it well tend to help people realize that it's about more than just them. It's about more than just passing the time until they're 18. And as you were asking the question, I was thinking back about my 5-year-old. We're going through that crux in time where she realizes that she's got a lot more agency than she gives herself credit for. Agency that is, I remember my parents would tell me, Andy, you can do anything if you put your mind to it. For her, I realized I needed to tweak that message a little bit. And my 5-year-old, her name is Genevieve, she was mentioning it's quick for a child maybe to go into victim mentality, to think that all of the circumstances and the forces of the world are conspiring against her. And I was able to help her unpack some of her emotions and give her the guidance that, Genevieve, you can make yourself do anything. You just have to try. It's not that you can do anything because nobody's going to go faster than the speed of light. Einstein taught us that. But at least if you can apply yourself, then you can make yourself do the actions that would allow you to accomplish anything. As an advisor, what I'm trying to do is give people that sense of agency. Especially if they are in a dead-end job, they can change jobs. This is America, we've got that ability. People who are entrepreneurs, they're ridiculously in charge of what they can do, their path. If they have one particular area, they can expand into another area. That's the beauty of running your own business. For people who are patriarchs and matriarchs, they have the ability to still influence their adult children to make sure that the lessons that they wanted to instill during their childhood lives, that they still have those opportunities as long as they're still talking to each other. So to answer your question, what do I view as success? If I could have a legacy where I'm known as a person who served to inspire others, to see the potential they had within them, and to give them that perspective and control to accomplish those things, then I feel like I've done a pretty good job, especially when it comes to people who are trying to make a difference for their kids and establish wealth that'll last for generations.
How does that show up in your business? Like if potential clients are thinking of, they're looking for the services you're providing, or maybe they don't even know yet that what they need is a financial advisor or partner for that. How does sort of your drive to inspire people to meet their own goals? Like how does one hear that from you? Do you incorporate that into your pitch? Is that in your marketing?
It comes from the very first moment when I'm trying to meet somebody. I remember the best business advice I think came from Dale Carnegie's, be interested, not interesting. And so what I try to do is whenever I'm chatting with someone, my core desire is to get to know them, maybe not on a deep personal level from the first meeting, but to understand what their values are, their interests are, because that is so revealing about a person. It tells me what their hopes and desires are. And more than that, if there is a way to add value, I'm able to connect with those things and hold the light for them that those things are possible. If they're inclined, usually I will do a deep dive discovery meeting with them. It's an investment of my time that I'm happy to make. I don't bill by the hour or by the conversation, but if a person can come in with them or key family members or life partners who are important to them, we'll do an inventory and what I call a mind map to understand not just their financial goals. Their goals are the intersection of their values and their interests. But if I can go one step beyond their goals to understand those values and interests, find out what they want to be known for, what they want their life to stand for, then we're able to chart out the things that are desirable for them, their needs, their wants, their wishes. And as it relates to their finances, we find out what progress they've made towards accomplishing those goals. They say a wish is, what is it? A goal that isn't written down is just a wish. So we try to document all of that through our process. And through that process of documentation, discovery, and discernment, we're able to help people connect with the strategies that are ultimately going to accomplish those things.
Yeah. So I'm sure you get this question a lot. And I feel like every industry is being challenged, at least notionally, by technology. I mean, I'm in the marketing industry, and we get, well, can't AI just write that content and optimize the ads and do this? Yes, robots can, in theory, do the tasks. And so, how is that showing up for you and your business? Like, is it becoming something that you're having to work actively against, like shutting down sort of perceptions around the role of the human financial planner? How's that showing up for you?
It is an interesting time for all of us to go through to see the ascendance of AI. I think it's important to recognize that there is still some artificiality to the intelligence. It isn't assuming agency or control from us yet. Although I've read enough Isaac Asimov to know that that if we get too reliant on it, that there's that potential. So it's always important to keep the human element. And what I try to break it down to, I've come up with a framework that I try to tell clients about how to understand AI and its progression, and more than that, what its place is in amplifying our return on life. Because it started out, we were in the agricultural age, and finally we were able to harness the power of machines. So we got to the machine age with Cotton Gin, Eli Whitney, with the Industrial Revolution, and that was great because it amplified our productivity. It freed us up. I go back to the printing press, the Gutenberg printing press. I've taken my daughter to Italy. Another daughter, we were in the basement of a monastery, and we saw the desks where the monks were transcribing the Bible letter by letter onto pieces of vellum. The printing press came out, and suddenly we were able to do mass copies of the Bible. And it was great because it freed monks up from having to transcribe letters to the higher aspirations, and they were able to finally get to what they wanted to do, which was to brew beer this whole time. So understanding that technology is good, it accelerates us. We went from that mechanical age to the data age. We were able to collect all these different data points by putting them together, but we weren't able to make any logical conclusions from that. The data age led to the information age as computers got faster, allowed humans to make better connections with what that data represented. And finally, we've transcended from the mechanical age to the data age to the information age. Now we have the intelligence age. Computers are fast enough, rocks are smart enough to think through and to make the connections that humans would make if they were looking at those points. But what we will never, I think, get to is what I call the wisdom age. Technology will never displace human wisdom, because wisdom implies that you have a soul, something that is able to exercise that discernment. It's a longer answer to your question, but I embrace technology because I think it raises standards of living. It allows us to accomplish things that would otherwise we would spend a lot of time, effort, and energy dealing with the mundanities that frankly computers do a faster and better job with, and they're less error prone to it. But with AI, specifically with the financial services industry, ChatGPT could put together a halfway decent portfolio for you these days. It's not hard. The math is actually the easy part. What AI doesn't get is that there's a human life at the other end of the line there. A human life who have changing values, priorities, and interests. It can make inferences, but it's not going to be able to connect the dots and relay that guidance in a way that a human can. That's where my differentiation is, and I'm not worried about AI taking my job. I'm worried about my job being taken by somebody who is using AI to make those connections faster. But that's why at Edward Jones, we are using AI in a way to help enhance our service, not displace the human aspect.
Do you find that that your potential clients are needing more and more sort of even there's all this privacy concern around it, right? Like, is my stuff are you going to give my personal financial information to is AI going to take it? Is that showing up in your business at all, or?
Well, we're not using ChatGPT. We're not using the private or the public model that puts our data into the data set that it learns off of.
Yeah.
Frankly, we value confidentiality and put great safeguards on it. A lot of any chatbots that might happen to be used are internal, so it's sacrosanct. We're trying to preserve the client's confidentiality. And more than that, it's not about adding client data into the set that enhances everybody else's feedback. That's the other advantage, is that because that privacy concern is there, working one-on-one with an advisor, maybe one advisor in a branch where they can not only be told that there's confidentiality, but they can see it. In this office, it's my office. I'm entrepreneurial. I have my team of administrators who help keep me straight and make sure clients get excellent service. But it's the three of us, maybe the four of us, working together. And we've got Edward Jones as a solid platform off of which we can deliver that excellent client service. It's not about the client serving us. It's very much the other way around.
Right. So where are you in your entrepreneurial journey then? So you've now built, you've built your practice. You manage a team of people who are on your team. So what does the future hold for you?
The future is bright because there are a lot more people. There's a lot more wealth to be managed. What people have are financial needs. They have financial resources. But all too often in this very noisy world, what we lack is perspective and control. We have a culture and a media that is all about trying to liberate people from their dollars so they can get that dopamine charge of hearing the cha-ching on the register. They get their new shiny object, whatever it might happen to be. Might be a smartphone, might be a new article of clothing, and the sheen of that wears off so very, very quickly, unless that transaction, that purchase, is aligned with their values and interests. The admonition I have for a lot of clients, especially as we're getting into summer, people are looking at properties on the coast or maybe a new shiny toy in the driveway. And it's like, you own what you love and rent what you like. And by that, what I'm trying to mean is, if people like the idea of going to the beach, they think they might want a beach house. I'm not against ownership of that, but it all happens the first season. Usually they're spending 2 or 3 weekends at the beach. The next season, they may be spending 2 weekends. The third weekend, maybe if they're lucky, they might get 1 weekend there. That's if they like it, if it's not part of their habit and routine. But if it's something that they own, they're not going to mind the cost of that. So that's just one area where I'm trying to add perspective to people's buying power, their decisions, their financial choices. And it's something that is so often missed in the world today, again, because of that sales culture, that consumption culture. So I think the future is bright for financial advisors because we've got tremendous potential to help people, work with them one-on-one. And especially as we're getting into what I call the great wealth transfer. I'm not the one who coined that term, but you've got $84 trillion of wealth that will pass from one generation to the next within the next 20 years. 70% of families feel that they are comfortable in having that conversation about what it means to tell their adult children they might receive an inheritance. But Jennifer, only 30% say they're going to. There's a huge disparity right now, and people they're not either equipped or they're not having the conversation as diligently as they should. So that is the next great opportunity for people like me and financial advisors, is to be that mediator, that guide to help families through that conversation.
I mean, what is the advice to the older generation? What's the pragmatic reason to convince an elderly couple that they really should share the financial picture with their children? I feel like that generation are still very private, around their financial situation. So what's the compelling reason that they should?
the data shows that there are three ways to address that wealth transfer conversation. The first is just to avoid it entirely. And the problem is that ends up compromising families more than helping them. Families are stronger when they work towards shared goals. But if they haven't had the conversation, they don't know what those dollars represent. They don't know the struggle that went into building that wealth in the first place. There's something called the contrateeth cycle. You might have heard of it as shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. First generation usually establishes wealth. The second generation either maintains or grows it. The third generation usually squanders it. They squander it because they don't understand the context of what it took to build the wealth. They don't have the behaviors to maintain it. Or they're frankly just self-indulgent. They have a sense of entitlement about them. By not having the conversation, you just play into the gravity of that force. And it is known, and it's been around for hundreds of years, that we've recognized this as a trend. But what's more powerful is we've seen an acceleration of this. 70% of wealth is actually spent by the second generation. It doesn't even make it to the third. So unless families are willing to have this moment where they're in the close of each other's company, usually in a nice social setting where everybody's on their best behavior or just enjoying each other's company, to talk about what the dollars represent, what values are important to the founders, the people who created that wealth, and how that generation receiving it can best honor the sacrifice that brought the wealth about in the first place. For me as an advisor, to be the facilitator of that conversation, I can't think of a much higher calling.
That is so powerful, and I think just a beautiful place to close this conversation, because that was fantastic. But I am going to put you in the hot seat with my pop culture question, which is almost the antithesis of that beautiful statement that you made around families living their values and working together for shared goals. What is your reaction to me asking Barbie or Ken, Taylor or Travis? Any resonance for you with that?
You know, it's peanut butter and jelly. The things that don't often seem to go together are the things that go together the best. Barbie and Ken is a match made in heaven. Barbie for the grace and elan. Ken for the pragmatism and the reality. But I also admire Barbie because she can do anything. She can make herself do anything. She's the embodiment of everything I told my 5-year-old. And, you know, Travis and Taylor, I'm from Missouri originally, so I'm rooting for Travis.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you. A great perspective, great answer on that. Andy, this has been a lot of fun. Great to get to know you through this conversation. And, I feel like we don't think enough about really what at the end of the day wealth really means and what it can do for families. So I appreciate your perspectives quite a bit on that.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to your audience and to add value. And very much good luck to you.
Thank you. You as well, Andy.
Thanks for listening to The M Word. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Subscribe and never miss a podcast. Visit arlingtonstrategy.com for more. The M Word is an Arlington Strategy production hosted by Jennifer Mulchandani. Our theme music is by Moochie. Graphic design by Kayla Fagan and Emily Rare. Sound engineering and editing by Ben Mulchandani.